Guys, we're back with the Smith & Wesson SW9V. Going to be doing a complete disassembly on this, so we'll get right into it. Firstly, you can see this thing is ugly. This is a borrowed gun just for the video, and the guy that had it before, the guy I know, tried to do some painting, and he did not do a good job at all. In fact, yeah, it's wore off. It's really cheap paint, plus the inside wasn't taken apart to do. So we'll start with a field strip, remove the magazine, make sure it's empty, and then going to pull back on the slide just a hair, pull your takedown levers down, pull the trigger, and let the slide come off. Now, when we go into the slide, you're going to notice, if you've ever done a Glock, this is as similar as it gets, because this was the gun, I believe, that started it. I don't remember if there was one before this, like the original Sigma, or was this it? I know the DEs are after, but I think this was the original one that got the lawsuit from Glock, and all the one of the ones they're paying royalties on. So as you can see, if you've ever opened a Glock, it's very similar. Firing pin block's the same, striker's pretty much the same, so very similar. We'll do the magazine real fast. Out the bottom of the mag, you're gonna have a small push in here. So you just push in. As you push it in, slide the base plate off. The spring and follower will come with it. And then to put it back together, you slide it back in. Push down, put your plate with the little nipple up, and it's shaped the same way as the top of the mag, so it can only go in one way. Essentially, that just sits right on top of there. Slide your base plate over while you push down until you get that click. I really hate to admit this. When I was younger, about 12, 13 years ago, I received a call. When I answered, they knew everything about me. They said I owed some check into cash place $800. And I knew a couple years before this that I used services like that a few times, but I always paid them back. But I thought, well, maybe I did forget to pay one. I mean, they knew my girlfriend's name, her addresses, her address, and they told me if I didn't pay, they would send the cops to arrest me. I remember YouTube and other information wasn't nearly as popular online like it is now, so I fell for it. I sent them the money, and now, after seeing all the scam videos years later, I know that it was a scam. If I would have had protection like Aura back then, I wouldn't even have received that call. Aura is the sponsor for today's video. Digital security is the most important thing that you can have. Data miners, scammers, hackers have only grown stronger as the internet has aged. And you'd be shocked to find out how much of your information is out there on the web, and all of the companies that sell your information. No matter how safe you think you are, it's best to always have someone watching your back. Aura is a Second Amendment friendly company, which I know is important to me and my subscribers. It does everything that I want in online protection, all in one simple plan. You get virus protection, identity fraud protection, credit monitoring, VPN, and more. I know people in the gun community, some of them like to keep a safe inventory, all their serial numbers, bills of sale, all on a nice little spreadsheet right there on their desktop. But that's not information you want getting out there if you ever did get hacked. One thing that I think is great for the firearm community is their encrypted online vault, where you can add all those things, like those spreadsheets or proof of purchases, wills, or any documents that you want to keep secure. If you use the link on the screen or down in the description, you can try Aura for 2 weeks completely free. Sign up and go back the next day, and you'll see that Aura has already gone to work removing your information from these data broker websites. I was pretty shocked to see how much of my information was out there. And once you sign up, you'll see all the services they offer. You'll agree. Don't forget to use the link down in the description. Let's get back to the video. It's put together. And then we'll start with the slide. So first thing you're going to do is get a small, whatever you want to use. I use a small little punch, and inside here, which it's, where'd it go? A little difficult to see because it's black, is inside the striker channel. Right here is a little plastic cup. So you will put your thumb over the back plate, push down on that plastic cup, and that plastic cup only. And as you do that, slide the back plate off, and then keep your thumb back here and slide it the rest of the way off. From there, pull the striker. And then pull out the plunger spring. And then your firing pin block. Let's see, let's go. Extractor just kind of pulls out, kind of rotates out the front. It has a small little spring in there, or no, it doesn't, sorry. And then the firing pin block is in here. Depending on how gummed up the gun is, should fall right out, but this one's pretty gunked up. As you can see, I've already cleaned the frame parts, but I didn't take the slide apart initially. So that's the strip slide. I wouldn't take the sights off. To disassemble the striker, you're going to push down. I hate doing these. So set it on in like this and grab the spring, push down, and then what it's going to do, if I can show, if it wasn't all gunked up like it is, the spring would come around the little cup here that holds it in place. This plastic ring is two small halves that go together that hold the spring on. So when we pull down on it, we can get it down far enough. Now this one's gunked on there good. Pull the spring down, then just lift the cups up. Usually they'll slide off of it. Oh, I caught it in my eye. I wish everybody would have been able to see how stupid that was. I literally saw it coming and it hit my eye socket and I caught it as I closed my eyes. So watch those because they'll want to go flying off. But there's your striker. It's a little liner, channel liner, spring, and the two cups. So these go around like that. I'm recording on a different camera, a new camera, so I hope it shows well. But two halves go around it once you put the spring. All right, so when we start with the frame, we're going to start with the takedown lever. It just passes through the frame, and then it has this spring, piece of spring steel that goes down into the frame and loops up and goes under it. So it just keeps upwards pressure on it. So if I push down on it, you can see the takedown lever kind of moving down. Nothing's holding it. So you just push down, and typically if they're not all gunked up, they'll just kind of fall out. This one was a pain the first time. Can't really it's hard to push down on the spring enough to get it through. There. Finally, you have to get it up and then down. So, as long as you push that spring down, I'll show you. Pull it out, keep your thumb over it. It shouldn't go flying out, but it's got a little notch in the bottom of it. So you push down, naturally the spring wants to fall and get caught on it more. So you have to kind of like flip it over or lift it up. Then you can only do that so much or it'll get caught and not be able to slide through. So you have to get it right at the right height to let it fall out. Most of the time you can just shake it enough to get it to fall out. At least Glocks you can. So that spring that's in there now just pulls out. It's got a long end, short end, long end. That's what holds it up here. So it just sits like this. Keeps it from going out. And when you push down, it allows the slide to come off or unlock. Okay, so next would be front pin. Just going to remove the trigger. That pin here will hold in the trigger, the slide lock, locking block, and trigger return spring. So I will typically just want to push that spring or that pin out, and then just keep your thumb back here on this trigger return spring. It shouldn't go anywhere, but as you can see, it's got a ring cut into it that the slide lock spring will kind of sit into. It kind of holds it in there, so it just doesn't fall right out. It's a fairly loose pin. So now that that pin is out, you can take something small, lift up the locking block, comes out like so. The slide lock will come out. It's got a spring on it. And then the trigger bar, and trigger return spring all will come out as one unit. And then trigger return spring, it's come solid hole on one side. The other side is a loop that just goes through this small little hole here on the trigger bar. If you want to remove the trigger shoe from the bar itself, you have a small. Alright, so now we'll go ahead, and if you want to remove the trigger bar from the trigger shoe, you've got a small pin, the top one here. We'll take and drive that pin out, and then the trigger bar will come out. Here's your little pin. I'm going to stick that back in there for a second. Now if you want to remove the pivot point or the trigger safety, it's another very small pin through here. It's gonna be a little hard to see me do this because I have to kind of keep my finger on the back end of it so it doesn't go popping up. But just drive that little pin out, and then it comes out just like that. So that is the little spring. It's just a piece of plastic. There's not actually a spring in there like you think it probably would have. When you go to put this back in here, throw it across the desk. There's a small slot that when it goes back in there, the spring part will slide up in just like that, and then your holes will line up. And then you can take your small pin and probably go ahead and start it. Should have started it from the other side, but we want to get lined up. Just tap it in. Even up the pins. Okay, so we'll leave that off to the side while we finish the frame. Oh crap. So I recorded this forward already once and I did it in time-lapse mode, so I have to do it again, so that's why the trigger, the takedown lever is in there again. So let me get that out of there real quick here, hopefully real quick. Oh yeah, that's a much easier way of taking it out. I don't know why I wasn't doing that the first time. So we did that twice now. So now we'll take out the back pin to remove the sear housing. Not a lot of force is needed, and then you can just pull the housing out. We'll disassemble that in a second. And then the magazine release. I don't have my light back in here, but if you look down in there, you'll see there's a bar piece of spring steel that's going down into the frame, and then it goes on the magazine inside a little slot in the magazine release, so it just pushes it back to the left whenever you push it. So essentially you just need to get something behind it and pull it out to the right till it pops out of that slot. I think I usually will just use a flathead and get in there, and then keep your finger on the back side of it so the trigger doesn't move, or the magazine release doesn't move, and then just pop it and kind of pull it backwards a little bit just till it sits on the front of it, and now you can pull out the magazine release. Now that spring, I wouldn't try taking it out. It seems like it's molded in there. I don't think other ones I've done are like that, but this one I've tried pulling out and it doesn't come out easily, so I'm not going to remove it. There's no point of it unless yours is broke, and then you're going to have to force it out. The grip plug, I don't remember if I already did that earlier in the video, but if you really want to take that out, it just goes through, and then right there at the back of the frame is a black piece of plastic. It's a tab. Just put something flat, a flat head against it, and push back and down. Until it pops out. So essentially you're just, this goes in and it locks forward on the frame, so you're pushing it out past that lip, putting it back in, just push it up in there until it clicks. I wouldn't do that a whole bunch of times just because it seems like it's something that's cheap and easy to break. So now the frame is completely disassembled. We'll work on the sear housing. Only three parts technically that can be removed. So the sear itself and its little guide or lifter kind of thing, the pin and the spring. So you'll just remove this bottom pin here. keep your finger over it and then pull your punch out. The pin will come out freely, and then the spring is there, and then the sear will come out. Now the sear itself is in its housing. I'm not sure what they call that, because Smith is very private. They don't put manual or parts diagrams out there. They're not in their manuals or anything, so getting their exact descriptions can be a little difficult. Now this does not come apart as far as I can tell. These are not, it's got 2 pins through it, but they're staked, it looks like. So this is all one assembly that cannot be taken apart. The only thing you could do is remove that spring. It just goes up and sits in the bottom of the sear with a little cutout. So if you really wanted to remove it, you just squeeze that spring and then it pulls off of a little bar stud right here. So I wouldn't mess with it. The ejector, it kind of popped off when I was taking that apart. It just sits in a little track here. But the trigger, the housing itself is done. So that is the 9VE, SW9VE, completely disassembled. And we'll go ahead and get it back together now. We'll start with the housing. So when this goes in the gun, it's going to go like this, and you just drop it down like so, and this is how it sits, and that's what it'll do essentially. So when the trigger bar is on it, bar goes in like this, pull the trigger, this point here pushes up on the firing pin block, and then as it pushes back, this face here is pulling back on the striker just enough to, once it drops by hitting this plastic going into this little groove, once it drops, it lets the striker go, and then it stays down until it is cycled, and then the cycle will allow the spring to raise back up, and then it's ready to go again. So doing that, what you want to do is get the pin ready. The spring can be a pain to put back in sometimes. Get it in there, put the pin just partially through until, you know, this doesn't want to fall out. And then the spring sits bring it up as close as I can here. It sits one leg on top, and then the other leg sits kind of in this. There's a little groove right there that it sits on. And you want to make sure that the top leg does not slip underneath. So if this spring goes in super easy, then you didn't do it right. Because it's going to be hard to see because it's so small to keep my fingers out of the way. And I'll show you after I get it back in there how it looks. So I'm just going to try to set it in there and then push down with my fingernail until I get the spring through, and then I'll usually like to take a punch on the other side and push it down to get it. And then I'll kind of keep it all pushed together and then use the table to finish pushing it through. It's not there yet. I'm just going to pull down a little bit and push from the opposite side to push the pin through. Got it through most of the way. Do the same thing, just kind of keep prying that hole. prime everything down until the hole lines up. Put the ejector back where it's supposed to be. Make sure the pin will go through. And then now, this is how it should be sitting. Spring on top, spring on bottom. So when you push it down, it should spring forward. Okay, so that's done. We'll put the magazine release back in, really simple. Start to slide it through, and you see it hits that spring, so just put a pick from behind and then just pull that out a little bit. Enough to get it in there. And then the spring will be sitting kind of on the front of it like it was when you first popped it out. And then just put your finger over the back side of it and push the spring until it pops down into the slot, and then it will work. Okay, so now set your trigger housing or sear housing back in the frame like so, and you're going to take your trigger bar and the trigger and go ahead and put it back together. You're going to push it like this. It's got a small slot here it slides into until the holes line up, and then I will just put it on my block until I see the holes are lined up, and then push. Usually I can push that down far enough to where it'll lock it in place, and then I can go and finish off the evening. So they're even on both sides. There we go. So that's back together. Should look like this. Everything should be facing upwards. Grab your frame, your trigger, your slide lock, your locking block. All right, so to put the trigger back in, we're going to start by taking the trigger and its bar, and it sits in this slot in the back of the frame. It can only gonna go one place. You just drop it in like that. And then when the locking block goes back in, it goes first, and this will all sit together like this. I don't know if I can demonstrate it or not, but kind of like this. And then the trigger in between is the slide lock, is the sandwich, so it goes like that with the pin through it. So I usually will put this in first and then start the pin so it holds the locking block in place, and then slide this in, put it on the slot and slide it under the locking block and just slide it through, and then until you capture it with the pin like that. Just make sure that the spring stays over there on the right side, and then back it out enough to where you can slide the trigger up in between. I'll pull that out. I don't like the way that looks. Pin through locking block. Come on, this is supposed to be the easy part. There. Just get it up in there like that. It's hard to see, but that's how it's gonna look. So, locking block, slide lock should all kind of stay together like that. The spring goes under the locking block. And when it's, if I just push the pin through now, slide lock will work. It's going to spring itself back down. Now, bring the pin out just enough to where it's still holding the slide lock in place and start lifting the trigger up and look from the other side. Until you capture it. So now it's all captured and working like it should. So now you got to take the pin back out, but enough to where it's still holding the trigger, the locking block, and the slide lock. And you're going to put your spring back on. This is where I would have usually used a slave pin on other ones, but I'm not going to. I'm going to grab the spring. It's going to go in just like this. Hook towards the rear of the gun with the hook facing down, and then obviously the complete circle I'm going to slide through into the trigger, into the middle of the trigger, and run that pin through it. So I'm going to push that pin back out just enough to where I can get that spring in there. It's still going to hold everything together. And I'm going to grab it, push the spring up, and then slide the pin through. It's really easy when you do it like that. Instead of with a slave pin, you assemble it all out here with just an old cut-off piece of punch that's the right length, and then you drive it out, drive the little piece of punch out with the pin. But doing it this way, I have it together. Now all I have to do is, if you look on the trigger bar, it's got a small hole right here. And I'm just going to grab that, pull back, and hook it, make sure it goes through the hole, and now everything will work. So it's a lot simpler that way. We'll put the takedown lever back in. You're going to use the long curved end. It will face out, so the shorter end goes down into the frame, and it just sits right in front of the rail here. It's got a little slot that it goes down into. So I'll just use some needle nose and just kind of push it down into that slot like that. It'll just sit down in there loose. And then you take your slide lock or your takedown lever. You're going to want it's got a ridged end that's going to face the rear of the gun. Just going to slide it in and then take something to push down on the spring enough to where, I'll try to show it, to where I can slide this in under it. And then once it's through, make sure you get that click so it goes into its little slot and it doesn't just push right out. Verify everything's working and you're good to move on to the slide. So now, putting the slide back together, we'll start with the striker. Gonna take the striker, its channel, it's gonna slide through like this, and then your spring and your two cups. Your cups will go like this with the tapered end down, so they go on like this, and the bottom of the spring rests against the bottom of that, and that's what holds the spring on. And those two cups are held together when the spring goes around it. So get those off and ready, and then I usually will put it through this hole here, get the spring on, put it down on that hole, and then I'm just going to push the spring down. It's gonna be hard to see, but I'm gonna push the cup on, and then I'm gonna get the other one and put it on from the other side. Yeah, I'm loosening the spring, hold on. It's easier to do it with my right hand. Oh, fudge. Nope. Now, it should not look like that. There should be no gap. It's holding it, right? So you think it's okay. It's not. You do not want it like that. So what you want to do is do it again. Push down. Make sure those cups go underneath. Yeah, usually I have to. Yeah. They should be under here. There should be no gap between the cups. So you can see this little indentation, this little hole. They should be below that because they will hold themselves in up here higher, and you don't want them there. So it should look just like that. No gap in between the two cups. If my video sucks and you're struggling with that, you can always look up a Glock striker, how to put it back together. It's the exact same thing. And maybe they can show it in a little bit finer detail. So, let's go ahead and put the firing pin block and extractor in. So I'm gonna drop the firing pin block and its spring down in there. And then I'm gonna take the extractor with its little nub here. That's where that hole in there I was talking about earlier. I don't know why I didn't make that connection. You just drop it down in there. Now it's still not going to be held in place. The firing pin block will, but this spring plunger is what is pushing tension on the back of the extractor. So when you slide it in, see how it's now pushing against it. Slide your striker in. Oh, wait a minute. You got to do that first. Yeah, there we go. And then get your back plate, slide it up, and then get something to push down on the channel of the striker. Push down, slide it up enough till that captures it, and you're going to do the same thing here. Push down. I'm going to use that. Push down, start sliding it up until it captures it, and then slide the plate up until it snaps. Take your barrel, recoil spring, just like that. Now I might have put the mag back together earlier. I can't remember, so I left it off. Let me put that back together, and then we do our test functions. And we're done. Okay, so slide lock's working. Magazine release is working. Trigger is horrible but working. Down lever works, and you're good to go. So that is the complete disassembly of the Smith & Wesson SW9V. I don't know if they made a 40V, but it would be the same. Really similar for the DEs or what the other few Sigma models that they made, the upgraded ones. It's very similar. So yeah, we'll be doing, I'm not sure what we'll be doing next. Maybe doing a shield, a standard shield. maybe a GP100, we'll see. But yeah, subscribe for more videos, like them, they really do help, and then check out Aura and use that 2-week free trial, and we'll see you on the next video.